Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Source Material. I am your host, Jesse Starcher, and this evening we're going back to the 90s. Yet again, one of my favorite decades in comic book history. And we're going to be looking at a Marvel book that came out in 1993. And that book happens to be Venom, Lethal Protector. And to go along with me on this journey back to the Unspoken Decade, if you will. Wink, wink. Back to the 90s. Stop it. Back to the 90s.
We've got company, Mark.
Yes. Calm yourself. Ronnie Adams of the Screaming Boy podcast has joined me yet again. Ronnie Adams, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, keep Mark in line, will you, for Pete's sake?
What? That's like herding kittens.
I hear you. Mark Radulich, the patriarch of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. What do you got to say, man? You ready to talk some Venom symbiote? Oh, we need to go across the pronunciation bridge, don't we?
Everybody hold hands as we cross the pronunciation bridge.
No. Mark Radulich.
Say it right, Mark.
Symbiote? Symbiote it is.
Yay!
All right. Are you ready, Mark Radulich, to talk about some Venom?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. And the man that's making his source material debut, Chris Armstrong, contributor to the Unspoken Decade. Welcome to the show, sir. Are you ready to talk? Is it Symbiote? It's all good here. Which one is it?
It was Symbiote when I was growing up, so I'm going to stick with that.
You're making your debut here. You know, we got together back on, I think, Hacker Files on the Unspoken Decade. Kind of give just our listeners an idea of your comic book. How about we'll do comic book background? What got you into comics? Do you remember when it was you first started reading?
Yeah, if I remember correct, I was like 9 or 10, and I was sick with the flu for like a week. And so my mom picked me up a stack of comics from the drugstore, and I never really read comics before that. And I kind of got hooked on them. You know, I haven't stopped reading them since, you know. That was 25 years ago.
1990s comics, I already mentioned the Unspoken Decade. You're a contributor over there. One of your favorite decades in comics?
Yeah, I've got a lot of affection for that. That's the stuff that I grew up on, you know, especially the early 90s stuff. So I kind of lean towards that. I mean, I still like current day comics. There's barely been a month since I started reading comics that I wasn't a regular, monthly buyer. So
yeah. What is your favorite 1990s comic?
I mean, it's not anything surprising for most people. Probably it's Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh, very nice. Good pick.
That was my favorite when I was a kid. My favorite single issue is still Infinity Gauntlet issue 4, which is the one where Thanos massacres everybody.
We're back in the 90s. We're doing Venom, and you actually requested to kind of. I threw the schedule at you, which, well, by the way, it was a small part of the schedule because the whole schedule was.
It would have killed you.
It's that much. But you said, I'm down for Venom. Why Venom?
Well, I mean, specifically, it was just because a lot of the other stuff on the schedule were books I wasn't all that familiar with, or stuff that I had read once but didn't remember that much about. I didn't think I could really talk that much about them. But this is one that I read when I was a kid, and although I hadn't read it in years, I knew I had a couple of the issues, and I knew I could get the others pretty easily, so I could reread it and talk about it a little bit. But some of the other stuff, like it was on the schedule. I can't remember what else was on there right now, but there were other things I was kind of interested in, but that was the first one that popped up that I thought I could probably jump in on.
Well, I definitely thought it.
I like Venom. It's not, I do like Venom, and Mark Bagley's one of my favorite artists, and he did the first 3 issues of this, so that was really cool to go back and look at these.
We did a marathon podcast on Maximum Carnage. It was we busted it up into 2 parts, I believe, and it was combined 6 hours long. Yes. So I became very familiar with Mark Bagley.
14 issues?
I want to say it was
14 or 16.
14 or 16. I can't remember. I was just looking at it yesterday. It's 14. I'm looking at an issue right now. We did a marathon podcast of that, and I remember Mark Bagley, his name popped up quite a bit, obviously. Mark Radulich, I'm going to throw it to you here, sir. We're doing Lethal Protector, and I know we've kind of bantered about it already a little bit, but why did we decide to put this book on the schedule?
the time of this airing, Sony's Venom movie starring Tom Hardy will have debuted, and so we are synergizing with that. The movie is loosely, and I really want to stress loosely, like a fat guy that's lost 300 pounds. That loosely, okay? loosely based on Lethal Protector. And I think by that, I think the company that he's dealing with is the Life Foundation, and it takes place in San Francisco, and the movie features Venom. I'm pretty sure those are the connections to Lethal Protector.
Very good. What we will do now is we'll kind of get into the creative team. I'll talk a little bit about that real quick, and then I'll do the synopsis, then we'll kind of talk our moments. This will be a fun show. So here we go. All right. So like I said, Venom came out in 1993, specifically between February and July of 1993. Written by David Michelinie, illustrated by Mark Bagley and Ron Lim, series colorist Sam De La Rosa. So we mentioned Infinity Gauntlet. Wasn't Ron Lim a big part of Infinity Gauntlet as well, Chris?
Yeah, he took over. George Perez was the penciler on the first 3.5 issues, and
That's
then
right.
Lim did the rest. Midway through issue 4, Ron Lim took over.
I'm quite the fan of Ron Lim. I like. He went to Infinity War shortly thereafter that series,
he did
right?
the rest of the Infinity event books that Starlin did.
Yeah, I've loved his art probably since Infinity Gauntlet. That's where I first saw him at. No, I can remember pulling those issues off the shelf and being so impressed with Infinity Gauntlet that I remembered Ron Lim's name. So there we go. There's our
really good stuff on. He had a good run on Silver Surfer and Captain America before that.
Yes, Silver Surfer. I remember plenty of pages from Silver Surfer.
His run on Captain America, did that include Streets of Poison or Streets of?
I believe, yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's the one Captain America story arc from when I was reading that made me fall in love with that comic.
So Venom, Lethal Protector, like I said, it comes out in the 90s. Here we go with the synopsis. All right. So this was total of 6 issues. Venom branching off into his own series here. After coming to an agreement with Spider-Man to finally leave him alone, Eddie Brock has moved to San Francisco. He has now become a vigilante, but with visions of not being so deadly. When Brock has a run-in with local police, Spider-Man decides that Venom should be brought to justice and heads to San Francisco. Meanwhile, Eddie becomes involved with a group of transients who live in a deserted part of the city underground that has been buried since the 1906 quake. Unfortunately, a man by the name of Roland Treese has plans to unearth some long-forgotten gold by instituting a park project as a cover to renovate that part of the city. Treese's attempts to remove the group have failed, so he plans on letting them fall victim to the explosives set in the ground. Eddie sees this as an opportunity to save some people and also win favor with the group as he hopes to finally find a place to belong and sets his sights on ending Treese's plot. Will Spider-Man help him or try to stop him? Venom also has to deal with the father of one of his early victims who has put together a group called The Jury, specifically created to end Venom as a threat. And what of Carlton Drake and his near-successful plan of capturing Venom and releasing 5 new symbiotes on the world? It all unfolds in Venom, Lethal Protector. All right, so there it is. That's my very nutshell synopsis. Don't really jump into every beat of the 6 issues. What I'd like to do here, we kind of talked about Chris's familiarity with the character. Ronnie Adams, Venom?
Yeah.
Venom, what'd you think of this guy when he first popped on the scene? What are your earliest memories of Venom, Eddie Brock?
I want to eat your brains.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like the penultimate Spider-Man villain. He was the negative copy, the exact opposite of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
The black costume, the bigger build, and he was cool because he didn't set off Spider-Man's spider sense. He was stronger than Spider-Man and all this other stuff. So, it was like one of those things where he's really going to have to dig down and fight hard to beat this character. I remember when Spider-Man got the black costume.
Mm-hmm.
And
are we talking Secret Wars or are we talking...
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I unfortunately don't own that issue, but I was aware of it. And I've kind of been aware and been, I guess you could say, a fan of Venom since the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mark Radulich, Venom, did you read much of him in the comics when you were reading back then, or? Yes.
I was definitely more familiar with Spider-Man's plight with the alien costume. Read Secret Wars. I know how he got it. He went to the Star Trek replicator machine, and he ordered a coffee black, and out came the costume. So,
did you actually read it?
what else?
Close. It's close enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what happened. So anyway.
No.
So he gets this alien costume, and I was reading Web of Spider-Man, which was the earliest issues of Web of Spider-Man pretty much all dealt with him, post Secret Wars and him struggling with the alien costume and it making him, go out at night and become more aggressive, his tricks with the black cat and all that. So I read all that stuff. When he finally got rid of the alien costume, I don't think I was reading. I think shortly after that, I wasn't reading Spider-Man anymore. The introduction of Venom, I was aware of because I know that he was kind of the comic book character du jour among my friends that were still reading. But I didn't know much of Venom in that whole early arc. I just knew he existed. And after a while, you couldn't. He was one of those characters like Deadpool or Cable. You just couldn't get a Squirrel Girl. You couldn't get away from after a while. They were everywhere. For comic book character popularity, to where it's just like nothing, suddenly they're everywhere.
Okay. I'd say that's apt because, legit, I can remember not hearing anything about her, not realizing I had her first appearance until probably about a year and a half ago, because it didn't matter much at all until she really became...
You put that on eBay if you haven't done it yet.
I hear you, man. Trust me.
What's your first appearance? Like Avengers or something?
No, well... Not exactly. It was in it's like a summer special. I don't know if you remember, there's like spring special, there's because it would go by season, spring, summer, fall, winter, and then it would start over again. I think they only did that for maybe 3 or 4 years, if I remember right. So she's buried deep in one of those comics. As far as I know, I don't know if that's a rare issue at all. I think it's just her first appearance, and it's rather. Am I right here, Chris, or am I wrong?
I don't think it's particularly rare, but I know I run a bookstore, and the guys next to me do comics and video games. Mm-hmm. They got one in a week or two ago. And they were telling me it goes for $40 or $50, I think.
Yeah, it's
not outrageous, but it is going for a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely more than what it was. As soon as she began to get popular, and I think she's going to be appearing in a show, isn't she, Mark?
I would tell you that when Disney gets a streaming service up and running, much like Titans, what was originally supposed to be a 30-minute comedy show featuring the New Warriors is going to end up being aired there. It was supposed to be on Freeform, and then it got pulled. I suspect, but I want to say it's even been shot, or at least a pilot's been shot. But I would imagine the New Warriors pops up on whatever the Disney streaming service is.
Okay, and that's supposed to have Squirrel Girl amongst them, right?
Yeah,
she's the leader, isn't it? Yeah,
yep.
That's my thoughts.
What? Okay, well, I should probably be better versed in Squirrel Girl. Why are we talking about Squirrel Girl?
Because Venom, Squirrel Girl, don't those connect? No, she was never a member of the New Warriors, but she's popular, and they needed a place for her. And so when ABC and Marvel and everybody were trying to put this pilot together, they were like, "Hey, who's popular that we can put in this comedy show? How about
They should have just
Girl?"
done a Great Lakes Avengers.
Oh, that'd be hilarious. They could pull that off, and I think it'd be funny.
Well, this is Marvel. Who's to say they can't in a few years?
That's right. That's true. Back to our alien symbiote here. Now, I had a few things I'd like to talk about here. Number one, Ronnie, you kind of touched on it already. Venom's deadly relationship with Spider-Man. These guys have never got along. And I remember, I think it was, it may have alluded to it in these issues. It was like a gold foil Amazing Spider-Man 375, I want to say. Boy, I could be way off. But anyway, they had their final battle. So that's kind of alluded to here in this. He's definitely one of Spider-Man's greatest enemies. When you think his rogues gallery, Green Goblin is usually going to be on the top, and then some of the Sinister Six, but Venom's easily in the top 10.
Yeah.
Now, back to the book. Mark, I'll start with you here. Do you have any comments on the challenges that faced Venom here?
Well, overall in the series, I like the fact that you had two different sets of bad guys. You had the one group that wouldn't have even messed with Venom had he not decided to protect the people living in old San Francisco. And then you had the group that was directly targeting him, that was out for revenge. So there was a lot going on with Venom. which I liked. It's so funny because when I was reading it, and then he falls to the ground, and they're like, "Oh, we fell through time," and I'm like, "Well," I just sort of rolled my eyes, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be Jesse's favorite book."
I do like the time travel, but you know what's funny is I was right there with you. It was what's strange. I was like, "Wait a second, what the hell just happened? Why are they in the past?" And then, of course, we get to issue 2, and we kind of find out that's not the case. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of like a takeoff of like The Village, the M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong movie. It's just it's this isolated place that never moves through time. So I liked all of that. I like, it's a delicate thing to try to handle a character who was previously a villain who was eating people's brains and shit like that. To like, okay, well, now you're starring in your own series, and what are we going to do with you that makes you somebody that people are going to want to root for, other than the gorehounds who are going to root for you wanting to eat people? Mm-hmm. And I thought they balanced it. On the one hand, it was like, I wish this character had been able to stand up on their own and not had to bring in Spider-Man. It's like, hey, just in case this book doesn't sell shit, here's Spider-Man.
Dude, he was all over, though. In the early 90s, if it wasn't the X-Men, it was Spider-Man.
I was like, when Todd McFarlane got his solo book, that was like the 4th one. But that was like the 4th one going at the same time. You had Amazing Spectacular Web of, and then you had Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man.
Yeah, there was a new Spider-Man every week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as we all know, Todd McFarlane's worst artist of the decade, right?
He's goading us.
Confused.
He's goading us,
with
ladies
Rob
and gentlemen.
Todd McFarlane's like comic book's greatest monster, right, guys? Anyway.
Yeah, continue, Mark.
You're on your own.
So Todd McFarlane sucks. We all know this. But
oh my gosh, what is wrong with you?
I think Spider-Man kind of had to be there for that contrast between him and Venom. Otherwise, this turns kind of into the Punisher, which I didn't want it to. I didn't want it to just be, Venom sort of, Davos from Iron Fist season 2, if you haven't seen it, just killing his way through Chinatown. There was Spider-Man there to kind of say, hey, you have to have some limits here. And there was a nice give and take between the two characters. It was a nice little, if Hollywood could actually get it together and Marvel could make this happen, I think like this as Venom and Spider-Man as sort of a buddy cop movie would be a fun thing to see.
Oh, jeez. That'd be crazy. Now, Chris, I want to just ask you real quick, because we had an appearance of a team that I don't know if they've appeared since then. I have the wiki in front of me, but I mean, do you have any comments on the jury?
Not particularly. It seems like, was that an issue 2 that they showed up in?
Yeah. Yep.
It seems like that was just an excuse for Bagley to draw some guys in armor. And they needed somebody for Venom to beat up. I don't really have a whole lot to say about him.
Yeah,
really.
well, I don't think there's much that can be said, to be honest.
I was going to say, I think the villain this is the weakest part of the story in terms of, like, not like the major bad guys, but the henchmen. You have the 5 nameless Venom symbiotes that do nothing and act like nothing and have no personality, and then you have these guys in the Rent-A-Cop Iron Man outfits that do nothing and say nothing and aren't really much of anything.
So we have Firearm, Bomb Blast, Sentry, and Screech on their wiki here. Let's see when their first appearance was. Did
you miss the other ones? Blinky, Pinky.
I'm afraid not. It was only, from what I can see, only 4.
You said yours was missing pages. Mine had those.
I got you. I was able to get my hands on the physical copies. Believe it or not, I got all 6 at an auction somehow. Venom Lethal Protector number 2, first appearance. And, 25 appearances of the jury. And it looks like there's some stuff. Most of it's all 90s. Thunderbolts, just like we said. Some Venom books. They were introduced as, like, his greatest enemies. And then on issue 3, I think Venom's, like, got one guy down and has his hand on his face. I'm like, well, these guys aren't much of a threat. Although, he did have to retreat. And then, let's see, what was the other guy? The symbiotes. Mark, you talked about the symbiotes here. Ronnie, what'd you think of these 5 new symbiotes?
Back in the day, I was like, that's freaking amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got 5 new possible Venoms. Now, reading it, they weren't that impressive.
Yeah, they seemed kind of one note. They showed up. They did a little bit of damage. And I want to throw it back over to you, Chris, because that was one of the things that you wanted to bring up, was about how at the end, I mean, Spidey and Venom had this battle with them.
They were able to get the symbiotes off, like destroy the symbiotes, but they spared the lives of the hosts. They all kind of crumpled into a mass of bodies, unconscious. And then in like a few panels later, they set the self-destruct on the base, and Venom and Spidey just hightail it out and leave the guys to die.
No,
Yeah,
I didn't
really
even
did.
catch that.
There's no other reference to them at all. Like, we have to assume they just left them there to die.
Now, these are representations of what we're going to get in
Separation anxiety. I think.
Separation anxiety.
Anxiety. Okay.
There we go. Now, these are these the same symbiotes that show up in that one? Because they look very familiar to me. Let me
I
look it
couldn't
up
remember
here.
the name of the game, so
Because they look like, I mean, I thought, oh man, here we go. We got these guys showing up now, and it's going to be on, but it was not to be the case because they ended up getting.
Yeah, it was a really, really anticlimactic battle between the symbiotes and Venom.
It felt like a video game boss, but like
Yeah.
not even like the end of a video game, like midway through. Like we were playing that X-Men game. Remember the X-Men walkthrough? Not playing. Remember the X-Men walkthrough that we watched?
Yeah.
And how like there's different bosses like Pyro who will turn you to toast.
Yeah.
And nothing moves the blob and all that. But then later on in the gang, all of them kind of gang up on you. It felt like that. Like these, like each one individually should be a level boss, and then like later on, you have to fight all 5 of them.
Okay, the names from what I can see here of the symbiotes they had listed was, at least this is from the Separation Anxiety game, what they had them here. Riot, Lasher, Scream, Agony, and Phage. So, again, they look like the same ones from that video game, but in this series, it appears that they die. So when we watch this, when this unfolds, I mean, they get fried to a crisp, and that's it. So
I'm out.
yeah, I mean, certainly and most likely they probably have some kind of backup, or maybe some of them didn't die. Yeah, exactly. Some of it didn't.
So I have the Venom Lethal Protector wiki open.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, seeing misleading coverage of Venom on television, heads to San Francisco, remember to put a flower in your hair, to confront him, and instead winds up fighting alongside Venom against 5 new offspring of the Venom symbiote. Scream, Phage, Riot, Lasher, Agony, Blinky, Tinky, and Zot.
I'm glad you read every single one of those correctly. Continue.
No, that's it. So all of those that you just talked about for separation anxiety are in this book.
So there you go. I mean, yeah, very anticlimactic. I mean, these guys show up. Oh my gosh, now they got to fight 5 Venom symbiotes or Venom offspring, I guess you'd say, and it's quite a fight. But then that's it. I mean, they get out of it. So did it feel kind of out of place to you that Spider-Man was grilling Eddie Brock's dad?
Look, Venom came close to killing Spider-Man on not one but several occasions, and I think he still has that with him in his heart. I don't think he believes that Venom, just like unhinged, out there with no tether, no leash, is good for anybody. So I think he's he's obsessed. He's just trying to get information, and at his heart, he's also a reporter, right? He's used to going talking to people and trying to get information. So it made sense to me.
Okay. And we do find out in the book that he's got some problems with the way he was raised. His dad never really paid attention to him. So Eddie tried to do, different things to try and get his dad's attention and affection. One of which was, he became an athlete. He just could not win his dad's love. And then he becomes this reporter to try and impress his dad. And then all this stuff goes down where I think he's involved with some kind of a hoax story, and his dad loses all respect for him. And then, of course, that happened, and his dad cut ties with him, which was a very important part as to why Eddie Brock became unhinged and potentially insane. Ronnie, did you know that about Venom before getting into this book?
Yes, I mean he absolutely. It was Peter Parker that exposed him, wasn't it?
Now I don't know. See, I don't remember reading much about Eddie prior to him becoming
It was
Venom.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
Okay.
Specifically, yeah. Spider-Man caught the real murder.
Ronnie, you like Venom as the anti-hero. That was one of the things we had listed here.
He's too good of a character, too important of a character. I say important because he's important to freaking Spider-Man. He's too important just to throw away as another villain. So, too popular, too much of a moneymaker. It was important that they do something else with him, do something creative. So I like the fact that they made him sort of a hero. I mean, he's an unhinged hero by all means, but he's a hero nonetheless. I've always been a big fan of the Punisher, so it kind of put me in the mind of if the Punisher can be a hero, then so can Venom.
Yeah, he was a straight-up villain for quite a while. He goes into this book, and he's trying to make amends. Mark, you like that spin on the Venom character, making him an anti-hero, or would you rather him just be a straight-up villain?
No, I think as a villain, it's like he'll eventually run its course. I like them as an anti-hero. I like, as time goes on, I like what they do with Venom. They introduce, I think it was like the Bride of Venom, and then he becomes anti-Venom and all of that. Like, this character goes through some pretty interesting arcs. Not that long ago, I actually read Venomverse. If I remember correctly, like, all the Venoms of different universes are like...
Oh, it's a playoff Spider-Verse then.
Yeah, it's Venoms of different worlds, different alternate universes, sort of banding together for survival of their race, because there's this, like, alien entity that's, like, out to kill them all and take their energy or some shit like that. So, I like what they did with this iteration of Venom.
Chris?
I'm going to say I like him better as just a straight villain. I get, like, he's super mega popular. They had to keep using him. There's only so many times he can fight Spider-Man, so they had to find other stuff to do with him. I can still read the Venom as an anti-hero book. So, like, I'm reading that new Venom book that Donny Cates and Stegman are doing now, and it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But I think he would work better as just a straight villain.
Do you prefer the Eddie Brock, like, half-crazy version of Venom, or do you like Asian Venom?
I like the Eddie Brock. I mean, I thought it was kind of an interesting use of the symbiote to put him with Flash and have him be, he was in the Guardians for a while. They did some cool stuff there. When they conceived of Venom, I believe the plan was for him to be Eddie Brock initially. And because it was a symbiote, it could go to other villains. And he was going to be, we might have seen Doc Ock with the symbiote. And then it might have moved on to Scorpion. But because he was such a smash, they were like, we got to keep Venom the way he is and keep bringing him back. And eventually, in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, that happened where Eddie was separated from the symbiote. And I think he did bond with Scorpion at one time, or maybe a couple of other villains, before he ended up back, with Eddie more recently.
Looking through our list of things here, Chris, one of the things that you listed here was the appearance of Venom. Do your best to kind of give us an idea of what this guy looks like and what impressed you throughout this series.
Well, Venom has the look of the black suit Spider-Man, which is a really simple Spider-Man costume, and it's a really cool costume. He got it in the Secret Wars event in the 80s, and eventually he found out it was a living entity that was trying to basically take him over, so he got rid of it. And so Eddie Brock ends up with it, and he basically looks like Black Suit Spider-Man, except he's got a giant maw that it's different, like, depending on who's doing the art. I know McFarlane's original Venom design, it was more like a normal human mouth coming out of the costume. I really prefer Bagley's look. He's got, like, the needle teeth and the green drool. He's got kind of like claws. His fingertips kind of point out like claws, and he's a lot more muscular than Spider-Man, who's more of a lithe, almost average-sized human, whereas Venom is more of almost a Hulk, not quite that large, but he's got kind of a bodybuilder type look to him.
Mm-hmm. Just, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, I'm looking at my issue number 1 here, red foil. Cover, gimmicked out. This was the way
90s.
Yeah, buddy. The 90s they wanted to flash off of that comic rack, and Venom number 1 definitely did that. If you can find Venom Lethal Protector number 1, you would be able to see exactly what Chris is describing here. Me personally, I would have to say, I love McFarlane's art, but I really liked Larson's take on Venom. There's a couple Eric Larson covers that I can remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody was saying that, I think it was Larson, that said that he really took Venom's appearance to the limit because he wanted to look ridiculous, and I think because he didn't like the character. He wanted to make it just so over the top and goofy looking. Granted, he didn't want it to look stupid. He just wanted it to look like so unrealistic. And if you look at a lot of Larson's take on that, I can see where that definitely could possibly be true. So,
yeah, he's got like a really elongated, unhinged bottom jaw.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's full, like, just countless teeth.
Yep. Scary looking guy nonetheless. And he's always, Venom is in the 90s had that look for the longest time. Mark, I don't know if it had this in the trade, but did you see what the next story is after Venom Lethal Protector?
Funeral Pyre.
Yeah, and that...
Three-issue limited series with the Punisher.
That's right. A combination crossover of two characters, two of my favorite characters, two of everybody's favorite characters from the 1990s, Funeral Pyre, which I own, but I've never read, I don't think. All right, let's, one more thing there, Chris, and I want to cue you up here if you have some comments about this. I mean, you mentioned a artist switch that happened in this series between, I think, issues 3 and 4.
Again, like I said, Bagley's one of my favorite artists, so, even if you're not into the story, these first 3 issues, you can just thumb through them, and he's a great storyteller. There's a lot of cool action, but then it switches in issue 4. It's not terrible, but it's such a step down from Bagley. It really kind of took me out of it. There are some good panels, but overall it looks really rushed. I'm kind of curious what the schedule was like. Maybe that's... Yeah. I know Bagley's kind of famous for his output, and he was doing amazing at the same time as Venom was coming out. So he was doing those, at least the first few issues at the same time. For a while, he did Amazing and New Warriors at the same time. But I guess it just got to be too much for him, so then I guess they were rushing to put out those last 3 issues with some replacements. And it really hurt the overall product, I think. That might be because I'm a Bagley stan. I don't know.
Well, this time on comic book stands, Image is just getting started, if I remember correctly. So these guys, Marvel is suffering. They're probably a year into suffering the loss of some of the greater artists that they had, or at least some of the hottest artists that they ever had on their staff. So I imagine Bagley probably had to go and try and pick up the slack somewhere else. As much as he wanted to stick with this, I'm sure they probably said, "Hey, man, we have a project over here that we need your assistance on," or something like that. But
I'll say also on the scheduling issue, in the first issue, Peter does a flashback, monologue, and he's talking about the events in Amazing Spider-Man 375, which preceded this directly, which was him and Venom's final battle, and then at the end, Venom goes to San Francisco, where Lethal Protector takes place. And it says, for details, see Amazing Spider-Man 375 on sale soon. So that book hadn't even come out yet.
Wow.
And they're basically ruining it, major spoilers in Lethal Protector #1 for a book that hasn't been released yet.
Yep.
Which I don't, I was, getting these books off the stands at that time. I don't remember that.
I would have never paid attention.
Obviously, we knew Venom was going to survive, and Spider-Man was going to survive 375, but still.
Yeah. Can you believe we're talking about a comic that's 25 years old? I mean...
Try not to think about it.
Well, Beetlejuice, the movie, just turned 30.
Oh, wow. That's rough. 1988.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Roger Rabbit turned 30 this year, too, and that's a movie I saw in theaters, and it's crippling with depression.
I don't know about...
Okay, I think that's just about everything that we all wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and get our final thoughts on the book. Mark Radulich, final thoughts, sir.
I thought it was a fun story. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. We talked about how the bad guys seem kind of personality-less and run-of-the-mill as far as the henchmen went. But overall, it was a good buddy cop story between Spider-Man and Venom. I think as allies, they have a fun chemistry together. I thought we were going into way stupid territory with the San Francisco out of time. But they quickly fixed it to where, okay, sure, a city fell down into the earth and they just built over it. This seems structurally sound. All right, that's fine. So I liked all of that. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get an opportunity to do more Venom books in the future, but based on this one, I'd like to check out a few more and see what else they've done with the character. I eventually want to do the run on Guardians where he was Venom's Space Knight, and he was up there with the Guardians.
Okay. All right, Ronnie Adams?
That was good. It's a great book. I mean, it's definitely nostalgic to go back and read it again. And it was a great introduction to Venom being the anti-hero. Overall, he was insane. Eddie Brock hated Spider-Man and wanted to kill him, eat his brain. He was a villain, but beneath it all, when you let Eddie shine as a human instead of let the symbiote take over, he actually just wants to help people as well. So I thought it was pretty cool. It was a good take on the character. Fun read. Definitely brought back some memories.
Okay. What's funny about this to me is Eddie Brock is kind of like the Wicked Witch of the West from Wicked, or Johnny Lawrence, in that when you see it from Spider-Man's perspective, oh, you're clearly the villain here, and then you hear the same series of events from the other one from the villain's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I see your point of view. I get it.
Yeah.
You're sympathetic. It's kind of fun.
I knew about this series for probably, since right after it came out in the 90s. I never read it. I've probably had it for at least 2 or 3 years that I've never had the chance to pick it up. So
For shame.
I know, man. It's one of those, it's a matter of finding time and actually sitting down and reading something.
You make time for comics.
I do. Every Monday night. Remember that, Ronnie Adams. Every Monday night. Right here on the Source Material
Taking
Podcast.
notes on Wikipedia and putting up with Mark and my crap is not reading comics.
That is reading comics. I had all 6 physical issues in my hands over the weekend, and it was good to actually get back to something that wasn't digital. So, yeah, I read all 6 issues, and I'm glad I did. I mean, it gave me a glimpse into the world of Venom after his war with Spider-Man is potentially over, because it seemed like at the end of this series, Spider-Man was still, he's thinking about bringing Venom to justice, but he's got a life in New York he's got to attend to. So Eddie Brock Venom is still making the neighborhood safe. He is the lethal protector. Chris Armstrong, follow that up, buddy. What do you got?
It's not a great book. But it's not a terrible book either. It's kind of essentials 90s comic if you're a fan of Venom. It's his first solo book, even though Spider-Man is in just as much of the book probably as Venom. Solid art, at least through the first half of the book. It kind of tails off towards the end. But a solid 90s comic. It's not Kingdom Come, but it's not on the lower end either.
All right, well, that, ladies and gentlemen, brings our discussion of Venom Lethal Protector to a close. Let's go ahead and get started with plugs there. Let's start out with Chris. Chris?
If you want to follow my Twitter, it's @BrodyMan34 on Twitter. If you want to know what movie I'm watching that day, that's about all I use it for. I'm working on a piece for the UnspokenDecade.com. I'm not sure when I'm going to be done with it, but it's about the early 90s crossover Blood Brothers, which is between Brigade and Bloodstrike, from Image Comics, Rob Liefeld's Extreme Studios book.
That sounds exciting. I'll be reading, by the way. That I'm all about that, buddy.
That's a new Bloodstrike book that Mikel Fife, I think that's how you pronounce his name, that he just put out is great. So you guys should look that up if you get a chance. But that's about all I've got. And even though I've only done, I think, one other piece for Unspoken Decade before, but the UnspokenDecade.com is a great site, especially if you're into 90s comics, so check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Check it, subscribe to that on Facebook. I'll tell you what, I love scrolling through my feed and then running into some of those 90s comics covers and reading some of the comments on them. A lot of fun. And I absolutely love Chris's contributions that he does to that site. He has been on a podcast with me and Dean Compton, and we talked Hacker Files. So that actually showed up here. Dean was cool enough to let us post it on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network as well, so you guys can go back in the archives and check that out. All right, Ronnie Adams, buddy, of the Screaming Boy Podcast. I turn it over to you, sir.
I have a show, and it is called
I woke up.
I had a stroke.
Continue.
It's called Screaming Boy Podcast, where we talk about pop culture, nerd culture, anything that tickles our fancy at the time. Comic books, movies, TV shows, music. We've talked wrestling. We've talked a lot of different things that we like. We are on a bit of a hiatus because, once again, I've some computer problems, but that will soon be taken care of. And then, but in the meantime, you can catch up on our show by going on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all these different places, and you can listen to the back catalog, the archives, if you will, of the Screaming Boy Podcast. And then right here, you can do that as well on the network, right here on the network, Radulich Broadcasting Network. You can catch our archives and also shows that you will only hear right here on the network. They are network exclusives, such as the rise and fall of Toys R Us, the day that laughter died, the firing of James Gunn. We also have one coming up soon that we're going to record. It won't be released. Yeah, it's already released by this time. And it is the rise and fall of Bill Cosby. I dread naming this other than the rise and fall of Bill Cosby. but it's going to have something to do with pudding pops, I'm sure.
Oh,
but,
my goodness.
We are also all kinds of social media, every social media platform possible. We have on Facebook, just look up Screaming Boy Podcast. On Instagram, look up Screaming Boy Podcast. On Twitter, look up Screaming Boy PR. And then we also I'll go to different comic conventions in the North Carolina area. So in October, coming up very soon, I will be attending the Fayetteville Comic-Con, where I will hope to meet one Mr. Tony Todd of Candyman fame. And he was actually in the movie I was talking about, telling you all offline, Hellfest. He did a quick, I don't know if you want to call it a cameo, but he was in it. And of course, he's always good in everything he does. I don't care what it is. Down to he was amazing in The Rock. So it was really good. And also, hopefully, we'll meet Tom Savini. Tom Savini is a director and most famous for being a special effects makeup artist. He has directed Mr. Tony Todd in the remake of Night of the Living Dead, which is the original version is my favorite horror movie of all time. Love that movie. The late, great George Romero. We'll be meeting them. We'll be posting a lot of pictures from that, a lot of cosplay, different things like that. So check it out on Instagram and Facebook and possibly Twitter. So that's it for me for now. We will, like, subscribe, say hello, whatever you want to do. Follow us. We will love it. We crave attention, and we want your attention because you are important to us and we love you.
Oh, Mark Radulich, if people want to hear more of you, where can they find you at?
Right here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network.
Right.
This week on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, tomorrow night is
Don't bother, they've already turned it off.
is our Damn You Hollywood review of Venom. Hopefully we'll have Jason Teasley on as he's a big Venom fan. That'll be myself, Robert Winfrey, and guest Jason Teasley, formerly from the Cheap Seats. It's album month all month long here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network.
Throwback.
Metal Hammer of Doom brings you, last week we brought you Power Glove Continue. This week, Monuments Uncovered by Mystic Prophecy. Following week, Outlaws to the End by Devil Driver. It's an entire album of country songs covered by a metal band. The following week after that, you know them as Lamb of God. Well, they called themselves, in this particular instance, Burn the Priest. And their covers album, Legion XX, or Legion 20, whatever you like. And then, all the way from Italy, Boys Just Want to Have Fun, it's Trick or Treat, Reanimated. That's all month long here on the Metal Hammer of Doom on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. We've also got a TV party tonight for Hannibal Season 2, our yearly look into the life of Hannibal Lecter. We've got the Damn You Hollywood review of the second, not the other second, but this time second, like the in-continuity second, 50 years later version of Halloween. And then, what?
I lost track of what you were saying.
Don't worry about it.
I'll go back to sleep now.
We'll also be looking at Daredevil Season 3. We'll be doing an on-trial for the other Halloween 2 that is no longer in continuity, the 1981 version of Halloween 2. That's myself and Sean Comer. And then finally, on November 1st, to celebrate the anniversary of the War of the Worlds radio broadcast, myself, Jesse Starcher, Ronnie Adams, and a host of others will be doing a TV party tonight, extra commentary on the movie Space Invaders from 1990.
Right. That is a full schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been source material for Chris Armstrong, for Ronnie Adams, for Mark Radulich. I'm Jesse Starcher. We will talk to you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye. That brings this episode of Source Material to a close. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
If you could scream a racial obscenity or an accusation that a famous person is a rapist, that's how we do it on this show.
Trying to
It's
scare
like
the
that
guests
kid
away.
you out in the corner that you don't want the neighbors to see.
Arr, like a hot dog in a cave, that loosely. Arr,
I don't know that. Okay.
arr. Chris, do you have kids?
No kids.
Okay, so you don't know the joy of having your podcast constantly interrupted by children? People try to have some kids and then watch them interrupt everything you try to do ever.
I can barely take care of myself.
Arr.
I wax nostalgic. That's the word I'm looking for.
That was like you wax.
I didn't just wax.
We don't need to know that.
Arr.
Bad opinion Tourette's is what it is.
No idea what you're talking about. I don't have any kind of Tourette's. I don't just blurt things out. You told me because Chris was on I had to behave. I'm trying to behave.
Oh, are you really? You're trying?
Dude, you started talking about seasons and I almost broke into Grease too, okay? And I did, so I walked. Arr. You know what I'm doing right now? While we're doing this? I'm scheduling. I'm scheduling.
Surprise, surprise. What year do you think Mark Radulich is scheduling right now?
2040.
Arr. Listen, tell your friend Chris here from the Unspoken Decade. I am a cultured motherfucker.
I think he can hear you just fine.
Arr.
That's sweet. Mark Radulich, you are to remain off of Facebook for the rest of the year when we do this podcast. I am not even acknowledging that picture that you sent to us about not abandoning your anus to the sun or something like that. I have no idea.
Are they telling you to spread your cheeks to the sun? What is wrong with you?
Arr. And so a couple of the ladies there, believe it or not, don't follow science, technology, and horism. So they didn't know.
Horism is not a word.
That's not a word.
Come on, dude.
It is the belief and practice of being a whore, and it's starting to come into America, literally. Arr. Anywho,
Oh my gosh, I'm so done.
Ronnie.
Chris, I want to apologize.
Still here.
Oh my god.
way to hang in there, guy. When this is over, tell me how the conversation with you and Chris goes for him coming back on, okay? Arr. You know, I'm gonna make you do an entire Swimming Boy on the robot sex revolution.
You're not going to make me do jack.
Oh, it's coming, literally.
No.
Arr. I would just like to say I attempted to behave myself. You won't.
You.
Bringing stuff up.
I don't know how you call that behaving yourself.